All right, I don't know where else to put this. I tried to file a report, and the look I got from the officer was one step away from asking me to take a breathalyzer. My company dispatcher thinks I was hallucinating from exhaustion, but I know what I saw. I know what almost happened. I've been driving rigs for 15 years, and I've seen some strange things on the asphalt sea, but nothing like this. So I'm putting it here. A warning. For any of you guys running the long haul, or even just a family on a road trip, burning the midnight oil to make it to grandma's by morning. If you see this place, you push that pedal to the floor and you don't look back. You run on fumes if you have to. It's better than the alternative. It happened about 3 weeks ago. I was on a cross-country run, hauling a load of non-perishables, the kind of gig that's more about endurance than anything else. Just you, the hum of the Cummins diesel, and the endless ribbon of blacktop unwinding in your high beams. The section of highway I was on is notoriously empty. It's a dead zone, no radio signal worth a damn, no cell service for 100 miles in either direction. It's the kind of place that makes you feel like you're the last person on Earth, a tiny capsule of light and noise moving through an infinite silent void. I'm usually pretty good with my fuel management. It's second nature after this long. But I'd been pushing it, trying to make up time I lost at the way station. The needle on the diesel gauge was kissing E with a little too much affection. The low fuel light had been blinking patiently for the last 20 miles, a tiny orange beacon of my own stupidity. I started doing the math, calculating mileage, and a cold sweat started to prickle my neck. Getting stranded out here wasn't just an inconvenience, it was dangerous. Just as a genuine knot of panic began to tighten in my stomach, I saw it. Up ahead, a faint, sickly yellow glow, bleeding into the oppressive darkness. It wasn't much, just a single light, but it was enough. As I got closer, the shape resolved itself. A small, single-story building with a low, flat roof and a short awning over a pair of fuel pumps. The sign was old, the kind with the plastic letters you can change by hand. A few letters were missing, so it read something like AS and AT. The light I'd seen was coming from a single, flickering fluorescent bulb under the awning, which cast long, dancing shadows and made the whole place look like it was underwater. Everything about it screamed, "Keep driving." The paint was peeling off the walls in long strips, like sunburnt skin. The pumps looked ancient, the kind with the rotating numbers instead of a digital display. The whole lot was cracked asphalt and weeds. But my gauge was now defiantly sitting on empty, and beggars can't be choosers. With a sigh that felt like it came from my boots, I geared down, the air brakes hissing in protest, and swung the big rig into the lot. The trailer tires crunched over loose gravel. I killed the engine, and the sudden silence was deafening, broken only by the hum of the fluorescent light and the faint, frantic chirping of crickets. I climbed down from the cab, my legs stiff. The air was cool and smelled of dust and distant rain. Through the grimy plate glass window of the station, I could see one person, a small figure standing behind a counter. The bell above the door let out a weak, tinny jingle as I pushed it open. The inside smelled of stale coffee, dust, and something else. Something vaguely metallic and sweet, like old pennies. The shelves were mostly bare, a few dusty cans of off-brand beans, a rack of sun-bleached chips, a cooler that hummed loudly but seemed to contain nothing but shadows. The only person there was an old woman. She was tiny, almost bird-like, with a cloud of thin white hair and a face that was a roadmap of wrinkles. She wore a faded floral print dress and a gray cardigan pulled tight around her shoulders, even though it wasn't cold inside. The moment I stepped in, her head snapped up, and a wave of what I can only describe as profound relief washed over her features. "Oh, thank heavens," she said, her voice thin and raspy, like dry leaves skittering across pavement. She put a trembling hand to her chest. "You gave me a start, but I'm so glad to see you. I get so nervous out here all by myself at night." I gave her what I hoped was a reassuring nod. "No problem, ma'am. Just need to fill up the tanks." Of course," she said, her eyes, which were surprisingly sharp and clear in her wrinkled face, darting to the window and back to me. It's just the silence, you know? It gets so loud out here when you're all alone. I understood that, I really did. The loneliness of the road is a character on its own. I hear you, I said, pulling out my company card. It's a long way between towns on this stretch. Isn't it just, she breathed, her eyes fixed on me. A long, long way. You headed east or west, dear? The question was normal enough, gas station small talk, but the intensity in her gaze was a little off. East, I said. Got a load for the coast. The coast, she repeated, almost dreamily. That's a good long drive, a real long drive. You must get awfully tired. Part of the job, I shrugged. I tapped the card on the counter. Can I prepay for, say, 200 on pump 1? She didn't move to take the card. She just kept looking at me, her head tilted slightly. Will you be stopping again soon, before you get to the city? Okay, this was getting weird. Probably not, just want to get as many miles in as I can before sunup. So no one's really expecting you? She asked, her voice dropping a little. No one's waiting for you at a motel or anything like that. You're just out here, on your own. The way she said on your own sent a little shiver down my spine. It was a statement, an observation. I felt a sudden, inexplicable urge to lie, to tell her my wife was waiting on the phone, that my dispatcher was tracking my every move. But the words caught in my throat. I just wanted to get my fuel and go. That's right, I said, my voice a little tighter than I intended. Just me and the road. The pump, ma'am. She finally blinked, a slow, deliberate motion, and a thin smile stretched her lips. Of course, dear. My apologies. My mind wanders. She took the card and ran it through the ancient machine, her gnarled fingers moving with a slow, deliberate pace. As the machine was processing, the tinny bell above the door jingled again. I turned. A man had entered. He was tall and lean, with the kind of weathered, leathery skin you get from a life spent outdoors. He wore a dirty flannel shirt and worn-out jeans. He didn't look at me, just let his eyes roam over the empty shelves, a strange, hungry look on his face. He walked with a slight limp, his boots scuffing quietly on the linoleum floor. He ambled up to the counter, standing a few feet away from me, and leaned in towards the old woman. He still didn't acknowledge my presence. It was like I was a piece of furniture. Anything come in? He asked, his voice a low, gravelly rumble. The old woman's smile tightened. She handed me my card back, but her eyes were on him. Not yet, she said, her voice now carrying a different tone. It was businesslike. Still waiting. The man grunted, sniffing the air. I'm getting hungry, he said, and turned his head, and his eyes, dark and flat as river stones, flickered over me for a fraction of a second. They were completely devoid of emotion. Then he looked back at the woman. Any fresh meat? My blood went cold. The phrase hung in the dusty air, thick and greasy. It had to be a joke, some kind of local slang. Maybe they sold deer jerky, or they were hunters. That had to be it. My tired brain was making connections that weren't there. The old woman didn't miss a beat. She gave a tiny, almost imperceptible nod in my direction. My back was mostly to her, but I saw it in the reflection on the grimy cooler door. There's fresh meat on the way, she said, her voice a low murmur. Just be patient. The man grunted again, a sound of satisfaction this time, and turned and walked out. The bell jingled his departure. I stood there for a second, my heart hammering against my ribs. Fresh meat on the way? A trucker headed east. No one expecting him, alone. Your pump is all set, dear, the old woman said, her voice back to that frail, sweet tone. It was like she'd flipped a switch. I couldn't get out of there fast enough. Thanks, I mumbled, turning and pushing the door open so hard the bell clanked against the glass. The night air felt good, but it didn't wash away the sudden, slimy feeling of dread that had coated my skin. I tried to shake it off. I was tired, overreacting. They were just weird locals with a weird sense of humor. I walked over to the pump, unscrewed the caps on my tanks, and grabbed the heavy diesel nozzle. As I stood there, the pump chugging away, my eyes scanned the darkness. My rig was the only vehicle in the front lot, but my senses were on high alert now, and I was noticing things my tired brain had initially filtered out. I let my gaze drift past the station to the dark gravel area behind it, and that's when I saw it. Tucked away in the shadows, almost perfectly hidden from the road, was a pickup truck. It was an old model, beat to hell, with a mismatched fender and a dull, rusted paint job. Its lights were off. It was just sitting there, silent and waiting. As my eyes adjusted to the gloom, I realized there was someone in the driver's seat, a silhouette against the slightly less black night sky. A prickle of unease turned into a full-blown alarm bell in my head. Why park back there? Why with no lights? Then, as I watched, another vehicle pulled in. It didn't come from the highway. It seemed to materialize from a dirt track that ran alongside the station. Another beat-up pickup, this one a dark blue, though it was hard to tell in the dim light. It coasted in just as silently as the first one, its engine a barely audible rumble before it was cut. It parked right next to the first one, also in the shadows, also with its lights off. Two men got out of that one, moving with a quiet purpose that was anything but casual. They didn't go into the station. They just leaned against their truck and waited, their faces obscured by the darkness. I felt like I was watching a scene from a movie I didn't want to be in. The pieces started clicking into place with a horrifying, metallic certainty. The pump clicked off, the tank full. My hands were shaking as I hung up the nozzle and screwed the cap back on. My mind was racing. I had to get out of there now. I didn't even bother filling the second tank. To hell with the money. Every second I spent here felt like a lifetime borrowed on credit I didn't have. I practically jogged back to my cab, my boots crunching loud in the terrible silence. I kept my eyes on the station, expecting someone to come back out, or the guys from the pickups to start walking towards me, but nothing happened. Just as my hand reached the handle of my truck door, the station door opened. It was the old woman. She was holding a steaming styrofoam cup. "Oh dear, you forgot this," she called out, her voice carrying that same frail, grandmotherly tone. But it sounded grotesque to me now, a mask. She started walking towards me, one slow, shuffling step at a time. "I made a fresh pot of coffee. You looked so tired, I thought you could use it. It's on the house. A little something to keep you awake on that long road." My entire body screamed no. Every instinct, every primal, self-preserving fiber of my being wanted me to get in the cab, lock the door, and lay on the horn until my hand broke. But I was frozen. If I refused, what then? Would they just drop the act? Would the men from the trucks come out of the shadows? The charade, however thin, felt like the only thing keeping me alive right now. Playing along might buy me a few precious seconds. She reached me, her hand trembling as she held out the cup. Or was it trembling? Looking closer, her hand was steady as a rock. It was the cup that was vibrating from the sloshing of the hot liquid. Her eyes, those piercingly clear eyes, were locked on mine. They weren't kind. They were expectant. "You take this," she insisted, her voice dropping to a near whisper. "It'll help you." I took the cup. Her skin was cold and dry as paper where her fingers brushed mine. "Thank you, ma'am," I managed to choke out. The words felt like ash in my mouth. "You're very welcome, dear," she said, that thin smile returning. "Drive safe now." She turned and shuffled back to the station, disappearing inside. I didn't wait to watch the door close. I scrambled up into my cab, slammed the door, and hit the locks. My heart was a wild bird beating against my ribs. I jammed the key in the ignition and the diesel engine roared to life, shattering the night silence. The coffee cup sat in my cup holder, radiating a sickening, artificial warmth. I didn't dare spill it. I didn't dare throw it out the window. I just left it there, a symbol of how close I'd come. I put the truck in gear and pulled out of that godforsaken lot, my tires spitting gravel. I looked at the mirror pointed towards the back of the station. As I rolled onto the highway, 2 pairs of headlights flicked on in the darkness behind the building. They pulled out after me, falling into formation about a quarter mile back. They didn't speed up. They didn't flash their lights, they just followed. 2 beat-up pickup trucks, the silent partners in this nightmare. My blood ran cold. This was it. The hunt was on. My foot pressed the accelerator to the floor. The rig groaned, slowly picking up speed. 60, 70, 80. I was pushing it far beyond the safe limit, the trailer swaying slightly behind me. But every time I looked in the mirror, the 2 sets of headlights were still there, maintaining their distance. 2 pairs of predatory eyes in the black. I grabbed my phone, just as I suspected. No service. I was completely and utterly alone. The next few hours were the purest form of terror I have ever known. It wasn't a slasher movie, jump scare kind of fear. It was a slow, grinding psychological horror. The road stretched on, an endless black void. There were no other cars, no exits, no signs of civilization, just me, my roaring engine, and the 2 sets of lights behind me. They were hurting me. I knew it. They were patient. They knew this stretch of road. They knew there was nowhere for me to go. They were just waiting for me to make a mistake, waiting for my nerve to break. Or, if their original plan had worked, waiting for the drugs in the coffee to kick in and do the job for them. I glanced at the cup, still sitting there. I imagined myself getting drowsy, my eyelids feeling like lead, pulling over to the shoulder. I shook my head violently, forcing the image out. My mind raced through scenarios. What did they want? The truck? The cargo? No. The man's words echoed in my head. Fresh meat. It wasn't about my rig. It was about me. I thought about slamming on the brakes, trying to get them to crash into my trailer. But they were keeping their distance. And what if I just jackknifed the rig? I'd be a sitting duck, trapped in a wreck. I thought about trying to call them on the CB, but what would I say? And what if they answered? The thought of hearing one of their voices crackle over the radio was somehow more terrifying than the silence, so I just drove. I drove with my eyes glued to the road ahead and the mirror. My knuckles were white on the steering wheel. My body was drenched in a cold sweat. Every shadow on the side of the road was a new threat, every bend a potential ambush. The hum of the engine was my only ally. As long as it was running, I was moving. As long as I was moving, I was alive. The night seemed to stretch into eternity. Time lost all meaning. There was only the road, the engine, the fear, and the lights. They never wavered, never got closer, never fell further behind. They were a constant, terrifying presence, a promise of what was waiting for me if I stopped. Then, after what felt like a lifetime, I saw it. A faint, almost imperceptible lightening of the sky on the eastern horizon. At first, I thought my tired eyes were playing tricks on me, but it grew, a line of pale gray, then a soft, bruised purple. Dawn. I didn't let myself feel hope. It felt too much like a trap. But as the sun began to properly crest the horizon, painting the desolate landscape in shades of orange and pink, something happened. I looked in my mirror. The headlights behind me were gone. I scanned the road behind me, my heart in my throat. The 2 pickup trucks were still there, but they were falling back, rapidly. As the first rays of direct sunlight spilled over the plains and hit my windshield, I looked in the mirror one last time. The 2 trucks were making a sharp, synchronized U-turn in the middle of the empty highway and speeding off in the direction we'd come from. They were gone, just like that. The sunlight had saved me. It was like they were creatures of the dark, unable or unwilling to operate in the light of day, where they could be seen, identified. I drove for another 10 miles, my body shaking with adrenaline and relief, before I finally pulled over. I killed the engine, and the silence that rushed in was beautiful. It was the silence of survival. I sat there for a long time, watching the sun climb higher in the sky, just breathing. My eyes fell on the styrofoam cup. With a convulsive, angry movement, I snatched it, rolled down the window and hurled it out into the desert. I watched it tumble into a ditch, a tiny, harmless-looking piece of white trash that held a death sentence. I finished my haul. I delivered my load. I did it on autopilot, the terror of that night replaying in a constant loop in my head. I looked like hell, and my boss told me to take a few days off. The first thing I did was go to the state police barracks for the county where the station was. I sat in a sterile interrogation room and told my story to a weary-looking officer with a thick mustache. I told him everything. The station, the old woman, her questions, the man, the phrase, fresh meat, the trucks, the coffee, the chase. He wrote it all down, but the look on his face was one of polite, professional disbelief. "So," he said, tapping his pen on his notepad, "you're saying this gas station, which isn't on any of our maps by the way, is a front for some kind of hunting party, and they chase truckers through the night?" "I'm telling you what happened," I said, my voice tight. "That coffee was drugged. They were going to kill me." "And you have this coffee?" I threw it out. I was terrified. He sighed. "Look, sir, you truckers drive long hours. The mind can play tricks on you when you're fatigued." I insisted. I gave him the mile marker where I thought it was. I described the turnoff. I told him he had to check it out. To his credit, and probably just to shut me up, he agreed to humor me. He said he'd take a drive out there when he had a chance. I knew that meant never, so I pushed. I told him I'd ride with him. I'd show him the exact spot. After a long argument, he reluctantly agreed, probably thinking it was the fastest way to prove me crazy. So the next day, I was in the passenger seat of his cruiser, driving back down that same dark stretch of highway, this time in the bright, unforgiving light of day. My stomach was in knots. "It should be right up here," I said, my voice hoarse. "Around this bend." We came around the bend, and there it was, the dirt turnoff, the cracked asphalt lot, the single-story building with the low, flat roof. "See?" I said, a wave of vindication washing over me. "I told you." The officer didn't say anything. He just pulled the cruiser into the lot and put it in park. We both got out. The building was there, but it wasn't a gas station. It was a derelict, a shell. The windows were boarded up from the inside, thick with cobwebs and grime. The door was hanging off one hinge, held shut by a rusty padlock. The sign that had read AS and AT was just a rusted metal frame, the plastic long gone. The pumps were there, but they were skeletal remains, their hoses rotted away, their metal casings pitted with rust and time. I walked over and looked at the dial. It was rusted solid. These things hadn't pumped a gallon of fuel in 30 years. "This is it?" the officer asked, his voice flat. I walked over to the building and peered through a crack in the boarded-up window. I expected to see the dusty shelves, the counter, the cooler. There was nothing. The inside was completely, totally empty. It was a single hollow room, bare floorboards, crumbling drywall. No counter, no shelves, no wiring for a cooler. There was a thick layer of dust on the floor that was completely undisturbed. No footprints. No sign that anyone had been inside for decades. It was a ghost, an empty stage. We checked the gravel lot behind the building. There were some old, faded tire tracks, but nothing fresh. Nothing to indicate 2 heavy pickup trucks had been sitting there just a few nights before. The officer looked at me. The polite disbelief was gone. Now it was just pity. "Let's go, son," he said gently. I couldn't speak. I just stood there, staring at the hollow building, the empty pumps, the silent, sun-baked lot. It was real. I know it was. The woman, the coffee, the terror. But the evidence was gone, wiped clean by the light of day. It was a trap that materialized in the darkness and vanished with the dawn. A net cast for the lonely, the isolated, the ones no one would miss for a day or two. I don't know what they are. Ghouls, opportunists, something in between. But they're out there, and they have a system. They know the empty roads, the dead zones. They set up their stage and they wait. So this is my warning. To all of you who travel the lonely roads at night, if you're running on empty and you see a single flickering light in the distance, a place that looks too good to be true, it probably is. Don't stop. I'm telling you, it is better to be stranded. It is better to run out of gas and wait for the sun. Because if you pull into that station and a frail old woman tells you how scared she is of being alone, You need to understand that you're the one who should be scared. You're the reason she's not alone anymore. You're the fresh meat, and the hunters are waiting just out of sight.